So welcome to Wireless Wednesday #1. I'm Elena. And this is Sandra. I don't know where she is on your screen. There we go.
I'm waving.
And we are two undergrad students. We work in the admissions office. I'm assuming that if you are here, it's because you saw the introduction to Wireless Wednesdays on our Instagram, but perhaps not. But so in case you didn't, then Sandra and I work in admissions. We're student ambassadors. So we are like kind of the liaison person between prospective students and the admissions office. And we kind of like give insight. Normally, like what our role is on campus is to give insight to prospective students who come to visit the campus and see what it's like. We give the student perspective of like being in clubs and being in classes and how all those things work. So that's our role. And yeah, really briefly, my majors are history, law, and society and environmental studies. So I'm double majoring. And then Sandra, do you want to say yours?
Yes, so I'm a senior and my major is International Comparative Politics, and I am minoring in computer science as well. So this is my little me. So today's theme, so every wireless Monday will have a specific theme, and today's theme is environment and sustainability. So this is why we have Professor Elena Berg, or Elena. We've been debating on how to call her. So we have Professor Berg, which is from the science department, and she's also director of the Joy and Edward Freeman Environmental Science Center, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but I did it all. And Clark is here too. He's a friend and a fellow student, and he's also majoring in ICP, but he's double majoring also with environmental studies. So this is our people. Guys, do you mind to like present yourself briefly? Alayna and Delane, just tell us where you're from, maybe your age, and maybe if you already have an interest in environmental science, maybe, or something like that. Maybe Alayna, you can go first.
Okay, hi everybody. My name's Alayna and I'm from Kenya actually. And I am in school in South Africa and I'm a senior in high school. And I'm currently studying history, literature, and creative arts. I'm not so interested in environmental science, unfortunately. I was looking for a seminar because I was very interested in your school and I was really just wanted to hear more about it from a student perspective. I'm looking to major in film studies, maybe something to do in history actually, because I do take history. So also really interested in that. But just a little bit about myself, I'm a very creative person and I would really love to pursue film production or something on the side of history and sociology. So that's just a bit about me, but I'm sorry, I don't really like that much about, I don't know that much about environmental management and international relations, but I just really love to hear about like your school and your student experiences. So yeah.
Well, no problem. We'll hopefully we'll maybe turn you to the dark side of the environmental science.
Yeah,
So you might change your mind.
Yeah. And the good thing about it is that it's like, at least in my own track, it doesn't have to be solely science or solely environmental stuff. So you never know, you could have a change of mind.
Yeah, and I have a little plug too, in that we're trying to develop more of the documentary film side of things. We're getting people interested in environmental questions, but through video, through film. So that there could be ways to slot into it, even if you're not expecting to go that route now. So
Exactly. Delene, I hope I'm not butchering your name, and I'm sorry if I am.
No, you're totally fine. You're saying it great. My name's Delaney. I'm a senior in Westland, Oregon right now, high school senior. My brother actually goes to AUP. He's Andrew. I think he's the vice president of something. I don't know.
He is. He's the vice president of SGA, for the undergrad.
Of course he is. I'm considering AUP as one of my options for next year. And then I found Wireless Wednesday through my mom, who just recommended it to me as a way to see what students do to be involved at the university. I didn't know it was a topic of environmental today, so I'm just interested to hear about it.
Delaney, this is so funny because I forgot that I told your mom that you should join the Wireless Wednesday, like, and just see what it's all about. That's so funny. I didn't read your last name when you came on the call, or else I would have made the connection. That's too funny. I was like, what? She's from Oregon? Because I'm also from Oregon is the thing. But okay, cool. Thank you for joining us. So yeah, our theme today is environmental and sustainability, but we can also branch a little bit outside of that. And like I said, the way our school functions, it does, even if you are a part of anything that's environmentally related or sustainability related, it doesn't necessarily mean that has to be your whole experience as a student. So Professor Alayna Berg will give more of like the academic side and the kind of institutional side of things. And then Clark, Sandra, and I can give like a student perspective into things. And then I also wanted to say really briefly, if at any point you guys have questions, feel free to throw those in the chat or raise your hand or just start talking. We're not that many people, so I don't think it'll be.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's my little spiel. Professor Berg, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I am Alayna Berg. I wear many hats. I do many different things, and I came at science actually not really as a scientist. So I was interested in, oh boy, literature, German studies, art history, drawing. I did all kinds of things as an undergrad. And I think that's probably where the seeds of my interest in the liberal arts education kind of began, even really without knowing it. I always wanted to know a little bit about everything. And then I love being out in the field. And so I trained as a field biologist. I worked with various species of monkeys. I worked with birds for many, many years, decades. And then I seem to be getting smaller and smaller. So then my most recent animals that I've worked with are beetles. So I've gone from like monkeys and, down through various sizes of birds, and now these little tiny beetles that I work with in my lab. My training is in animal behavior. My training is, as I said, bigger than that. I could not decide what to do as an undergraduate, so I just did all of it. And then realized actually how much I loved being outside and I loved watching animals. And so found a kind of creative way to get back to that. I did a master's in biological anthropology, so interested in primatology, primate behavior, but also human evolution. I'm very enamored with forensics and osteology, human bones. So I went through a phase of thinking about nothing but bones. So I did my master's in that and thought, well, I really want to go into the field and I really want to experience being out in the world without being a tourist. I didn't enjoy the sort of voyeuristic qualities of travel, but I was really curious about languages and other cultures. And so I just, I tried to think about how I could be part of these different places without being that tourist. And I loved animals, always did. And so I was, well, it seemed like the natural choice is to work with animals within the context of communities, get to know people that way and live abroad. So I did that for about 20 years, more or less. I got my PhD at UC Davis in animal behavior with another focus on sort of population biology. And then I did 10 years of postdocs where I jumped all over the world. I worked in Oregon, actually. So I was at Portland State University. I worked at Harvard University for a while. I worked at UCLA. And then I was at the University of Munich, actually more of as an administrator. So I also wore that hat for a while. I ran 2 graduate programs there. And then I decided to go back into science full time. And that's when I started studying beetles in Sweden. So I lived in Uppsala, Sweden for 4 years. And, I bounced around so much, not really knowing quite where I wanted to end up. Maybe I'll always be a kid in that way. But I saw this advertisement for the American University of Paris, and I couldn't believe that a place like this existed. I was like, this, because I love the liberal arts. I love it because I love combining different fields in different ways. And I wanted to be at a liberal arts institution, but I really like living in Europe. So I was like, well, I can either have Europe or I can have the US liberal arts system. So for me, the ability to combine those two just felt like magic. And so it's been a really perfect fit for me in that way. And I kind of bring that style of teaching and learning with me into the classroom. I'm going on and on and on, but I'm the director of this Environmental Science Research Center, which is essentially a center that does all kinds of different things, which I guess fits. We do research on beetles in my lab. We have a new professor who's going to be working on freshwater species in the lab. Another professor now who's interested in marine organisms. So we have all kinds of cool people now in the lab. So the projects there that students can do, but I'm also really involved with student initiatives around sustainability in the environment, just to get people feeling motivated and positive, because it's really daunting when we think about kind of the state of the world. And I think that funneling people into those positive outlets is really great. So there's a brief little intro.
Thank you for sharing that. Clark, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. My name is Clark. I am a student at AUP. This is my, let's see, 5th semester. I'm from Idaho. I have been to West Linn many times. And I'm majoring in ICP and, which is International and Comparative Politics, and Environmental Studies is my second major, with a minor in econ. Let's see, I could talk about some environmental stuff. I know that the preparatory document we had wanted me to go into the project I'm working on, so I guess I can do that. But
don't pressure, right? Because
so if you do decide to do an environmental studies major, which Alayna and I are doing, for a senior project, you can either do the Sustainable Development Practicum in India, which we can talk about that from later, but basically you take a course at AUP during the semester, and then you go to India for a month and partner with a sustainability organization, and you get to tour a bunch of them. Or you can do a senior project, which can basically be whatever you want. You could write like a 40, 50 page paper if you wanted to. But what I decided to do is I'm working on getting a composting / food waste management system set up at our university. So we have what's called the Amex Cafe, which is sort of like our cafeteria area. It's where it's just a cafe in our school where you can get food and study if it's not too loud. And so for my project, I have been reaching out to different companies in Paris to see who might be willing to pick up our food waste and compost it themselves. I've been reaching out to some community gardens to see who might accept compost if we decide to do it at our university. I've been working closely with the Amex Cafe itself, and also Professor Berg, who's been very helpful. And that's another great thing about the university too, is that it's very small. And so if you decide to do environmental studies, that's great, but whatever department you're in, you get to know the professors quite well throughout however long you're here. And so they're very supportive if you have an initiative that you want to get done, and you talk to them about it. They are very enthusiastic generally about helping you in any way they can to get done whatever you want to get done. So that's what I'm currently working on this semester.
Cool.
Thank you, Clark. So do you guys have any questions so far, or otherwise we have a few questions that we can ask our two beautiful panelists here, and feel free to get, if they don't go in depth, or if there's something that triggers a question, feel free to let us know, okay guys? So I'll have a first question from Professor Berg. Like, when students come to AUP, do they usually come within the major in mind, or some student will like kind of discover the major in environmental studies once at AUP? And also, could you tell us the difference between, like, I know we have major and minor. Can you talk about briefly those two? Because I know a lot of people confuse them. I'm the first one to get always confused about the two different ones we have. So that would be great if we could have like a little bit more clarity here.
Sure. And I think, since we have the two of you aren't necessarily focused on environmental science, we can also just talk more broadly about how things work. But I mean, again, you students can weigh in with how it was for you, but my sense is that we have a real mix of students where they arrive at AUP and they know exactly what they want to do, and other students who arrive at what they want to do through exploring various courses in their first couple of years. One thing that's nice about the liberal arts system is that it essentially, the philosophy is that to be able to move through the world and be an effective kind of citizen of the world, it's important to understand how all kinds of different disciplines work. So we encourage our students to take a few classes in kind of broad subjects, and then also to focus in on particular areas of focus. So the major is, my cats are going to do that too, Sandra. In fact, I'm surprised they haven't done it already. Exactly, they like to put their butts right up against the screen. The major is where you put most, I suppose that's where you have most of your courses. That's kind of your major focus. That may come not until you're in your third year for some students, right? Like people take different amounts of time arriving at that major. And then actually all of you are doing double majors, where you're exploring really quite different but complementary fields. And then you're taking a bunch of classes in these two different fields, other people, and then even minors. So the idea of a minor is just that you're sampling a field in maybe a little bit more detail than just taking one or two classes. You may take several classes in a field, but it's not really enough to have a deeper understanding of that discipline. So that's majors and minors, but you're really not obligated to kind of figure all that out right away. But if you do know what you want, then we're still going to encourage you to take courses kind of outside of that focus, because this is the whole point actually of this style of education. We can't really get away from that. So sometimes we have freshmen who come in and they're like, I just want to do this one thing and I don't want to take any other classes. And that we always have to work with students to get out of that mindset, because actually you can find your way to your own very specific passion, sometimes indirectly through doing other things. So we'll encourage you to kind of play with different fields. You'll take a little science, a little math. You'll work on your writing. You'll take classes in a bunch of different disciplines. You'll take some French. If you have a really high level of any one of those things, sometimes you can just place out of those. It doesn't mean that every student is going to do that. Right, so in terms of environmentally related areas, we have the environmental studies major, which is actually only a couple of years old. It's really new, but it's taking off. And we're actually struggling to kind of fill all of the needs that we have for teaching the different classes in that area. But environmental studies is it's a perfect liberal arts major in that it is a sampling of a lot of different fields that all tie back into the environment in some way. So whether that's, you can have politics in the environment, you can have, we have people interested in journalism in the environment, finance in the environment. Any discipline really can connect back to the environment. And so it's a kind of a challenging major for some, because it's a catch-all. And so we have to work with students to actually find their way through that major, so they don't just randomly pick classes and say environment, but it's a fun one. It's just challenging because we also work with professors who are all over campus, and so it's coordinating their schedules and our schedules and figuring out when they're teaching their classes can be kind of complicated. And then we also have a major in quantitative environmental science, which is more of a marriage of math and science, where people are really interested in manipulating data and understanding how to analyze data. And then we have a minor in environmental science. So just in terms of what we offer now in science, we're really focused on the environment, but mostly it's because that's such a great field for exposing people to all kinds of different disciplines.
I see Alayna has a question, or Elena. Please talk.
Yeah, no, thank you. You got it right the first step. It's a lot.
I know we've got an Alayna, an Alana, and another.
I know,
I'm so
confusing. I was like, is she
lost?
No, my question, I heard most of you are American, so I just want to know what the adjustment was like coming to Europe, because I know it's an American university, but you know, shifting from a place that you really know to a place where it's predominantly French speaking, and you're not necessarily sure how the social experience is gonna be. Like, what was that like coming into Europe? And when I get if I join the school, for example, will I have to learn French? Is that like a compulsory thing? Yeah, so those are just like one of my two questions.
So I can answer on the French side, and then I'll answer the other one because I'm actually French. So for me, I just think to France was not hard. In a way, it was kind of hard because I just came back from 8 years abroad, so it was hard to go back. But on the French one, yes, you are required to take, I think it's at least 1 or 2 French classes. But don't worry if you struggle. We have tutor. I'm one. There's definitely ways to help you, and you're gonna pick up the language because you live in the country. You will have to go get your grocery. You'll have to go get your bread and stuff like that. So you're gonna pick the language by just living in the country. So I wouldn't stress too much about the language. But it would be a shame if you leave France after whatever number of years you stay at AUP. If you're a transfer, or if you come as a freshman, 4 years, you should be able to still speak a little bit of French, for sure.
To add on to that, yeah, and also kind of to answer your first question, I think what's interesting about AUP is that you can really customize the experience to what you're looking for. So if you're looking to speak a lot of French and learn a lot of French, you are in the perfect place to do that. You know, like outside of school, but maybe even inside of school, we have a fairly large French population that you could kind of mingle with. But then if you decide that French is not so important, maybe French culture is not so important to you, then you can also kind of stick within our AUP community. And then even outside of that, there's tons of expat groups all over Paris. So like from literally every country, there's some sort of Facebook group of people who are like there's an American expat group in Paris Facebook group, you know? So yeah, I think you can really customize that to what you're looking for. And as far as like needing French, yeah, I would say you're definitely going to learn those sort of like day-to-day sentences, like when you go to the bakery and when you go to the grocery store. And outside of that, the commitment is really up to you outside of those daily interactions.
But you still have to take French classes though.
Or test out of it.
Or test out of it, obviously, yeah.
One thing I want to dive in here and mention something I've noticed with students, that there's an adjustment on both sides, which is really interesting because you have, of course, students coming from the US who are adjusting to French culture and how life works in France, but you also have Europeans who may not be familiar with the American education system coming in to an American school with a really different style of teaching and learning. So my experience, for example, with my French students is that if I get them early, they're a little like they're not used to interacting in quite the way that we expect people to interact in our classrooms, right? They've been more used to a style of education where they take notes and they're diligent and respectful, but they're not necessarily like on level with their professor having debates and conversations. And so that's another kind of thing about coming to the university, is that you'll be immersed in people adjusting to the AUP culture in really different kinds of ways.
Mhm.
There's, I think, a third level of adjustment as well. And this one's not France or Paris specific, but depending on where you guys are coming from, I came from an area that was quite rural, and Paris is a very large city. So I don't know if you guys are looking at other colleges in other large cities, but I know that for me, that was definitely maybe more of an adjustment than the cultural adjustment, because suddenly I lived in a small town in Idaho, and then I'm taking a 45-minute bus ride each way every day, and that was kind of exhausting, but you do get used to it, and then you can also move closer to the school, which I did.
Yeah, it seems like we have students who live super close and then others that are further out. Like there's a big variation in where students are living. And then some students like take Ubers the whole time, and other students, are on the metro like the first day, and that's how they live. So it seems like we have a really varied population in terms of how people are interacting with the city as well.
Yeah. I hope that answered your question, Alayna.
It did, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, so maybe did we get to oh yeah, if I was gonna say, did we ever answer if students come in knowing the major they want to do? But I think we covered that.
just did that.
So going back to sort of the environmental majors, how much lab work is there actually involved in the majors, and math work?
Oh, okay. So that's another one so some of the students that I enjoy working with most may not have really realized they were interested in science or the environment, and they kind of come into it. And sometimes that's, I really love that, right? Because they're like, oh my God, I didn't make this connection, and now here I'm doing this cool stuff with the environment. It really depends. So kind of like you're saying, you can customize your experience at AUP. You can also do that in terms of most of our majors. Environmental studies is probably is one of the broader ones that I'm aware of that really is just across so many different departments. But I have students who are really focused they want to get experience doing lab work. They want to understand what it means to collect data, to analyze data. And so I work with them on lab work. So I've worked with students in my lab a bunch. And then they generally, well, it depends on their level of involvement. So if I have a student who spends a whole semester gathering data for a senior project, then that person generally is a co-author on a publication. If, it takes a while to get those out, but so that can be a huge investment in the time it takes to collect the data and be part of that whole process. For other people, they might just come in and do a quick little, few weeks here and there just to see what it's all about. So that's in terms of just projects, right, in my lab. But then in terms of lab work in general, every student coming in is required to take one science class with a set of labs attached to that. So that really, at this point, we're trying to imagine other ways of doing it, but right now it's essentially a series of different labs where you have a project each session, and you try to answer a particular question, you learn a particular method, you're essentially learning how scientists think, learning kind of how scientists approach questions and problems. And that's over a course of a semester. And then if you don't want to go back into that ever again, you don't need to, but that is sometimes a jumping off space. I've had students who've done labs in my class and then turn that into a senior project or a sort of independent study where they then go further into that question. So for example, I had a student who was taking my animal behavior class, and I think she was a psychology major, but wasn't particularly focused on behavior or anything like that. And she studied for one of her projects for my her science lab, what kind of eye color preferences people have. So she looked at like if people prefer different eye colors, does it depend on your own eye color? What's the eye color of your like current romantic partner? Like, is it the same as yours? Is it different? Right. So it was this kind of question about eye color, which I thought was super cool and pretty novel. And she got so into it that she ended up wanting to spend a semester basically doing that, you know, asking that question in more detail. So you never know what you're going to come out with that, but that's, I don't know if that really answers the question about lab work, but it really depends on you. And I think that that's actually going to change as we expand our focus on environmental science in the future with the 2 new professors that we have now.
Mm-hmm. And something that you said that resonated with me was that people go in not necessarily knowing that they actually want to do like science or lab work, you know. And I felt like that was the case for me as well, because I went into the environmental studies major having already declared my first major, which was HLS or History, Law, and Society, and kind of being interested in environmental studies from that perspective of like social justice and things like that. And then one of the themes in AUP, which I think goes across any major, not just environmental ones, is sort of like the networking experience you get with your professors. And because it is such a small school, as you were saying, Clark, we have really intimate connections with our professors, like really close bonds. And I actually had Professor Berg, you know about this, but I did an internship with one of my science professors, and I worked in her lab in Germany. So I guess it wasn't her lab, but on her experiment in Germany with her over the summer. And I never thought that that was something I would want to do particularly, but I got this very unique experience, and it kind of showed me that that is something I might be interested in, even though that wasn't what I initially had gone into the major thinking I wanted to do, you know. So
or at the very least, it gives you even if you never go into that in your future, it gives you an understanding of how people answer questions, right? Like we're bombarded with information that's based on science that we just don't even look at very closely, right? Like, oh, red wine is good for you. Like you should, you know, this disease is going to make you more likely to get COVID, or, you know, whatever it is, right? There's all kinds of science that we're bombarded with every single day. And many people don't really even understand how people ask questions as scientists, right? It's a very particular methodology. And I think just gaining a basic understanding of that, even if you never end up doing science yourself, I think that that's really important.
I agree.
Going off what Elena was talking about internship, like how common is it for environmental study student to get internship? Do they look in internship on that field, or do they go somewhere else? Or do you have even students who are not part of that major at all who go into that? Do you have any experience with students regarding that?
So I'm not, you know, I have to say that I don't think the whole world of internships is like, we need to keep developing that, because essentially we have one climate physicist, and then I was hired. He works on big international climate change initiatives, not local. He's not local to Paris, he's Italian. I'm an American, you know, who sort of came through several countries to get here, but I don't have a network of people that I work with in the area. And now we have this growing major with an increasing demand. Students have to do internships. So one area that, you know, I wish I knew tons of people and knew of all these opportunities, but one option for students, and this is applicable to all students, not just in environmental studies. There are many of the majors where you can take an internship as part of your, you know, in place of a senior project or something like that. Generally, once you're, I think, a junior, you can take, in your third year, you can take internships.
Yeah.
And that we do have an internship office that collates and gathers connections and builds relationships with various companies and places to be able to place students. But you know, we don't have a very big emphasis on the environment at AUP yet in the internship offerings. And so part of what we ask is for everybody to keep their ears out, and for if people have had an internship or do have connections, right? Like Sandra, you were talking about some of the, you know, like these relationships are ones that I hope we can kind of keep building. Or Clark, for example, stuff you're doing with composting, you're starting to meet interesting people who, you know, with these community gardens or dealing with food waste and all this kind of interesting stuff. So there are, I think there's opportunities that could open up for cool internships there. But I do feel like it has to be kind of a community effort, and that students who want internships often have to take a lot of initiative to, you know, get out there and see what's out there. And if language, that's another reason to learn some French, is that that opens up all kinds of doors. If you want to do work locally, it's just much easier if you can navigate in the local language.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. And another thing too, like going off of that, AUP organized a lot of events with alumni and outside people, and mingling with those people is a good thing. For example, like Elena Berg and that other chemist, she was talking about, referring to Claudio Piani. They organized that conference 2 years ago, 2 springs ago, and they worked with an alumni from AUP, and we met her during the conference. We started to work with her. Clark was part of the project too. We started to work with her outside the conference, and this opened door for Clark and I and 2 other students. We went to the Oslo Pact, which was the first conference that the Nobel Peace Center created on climate and peace conference. And so we got invited, we were able to participate and things like that. And then also through that alumni, we met her husband, and her husband gave us the opportunity to go because he saw the work we put into that conference and things like that. So he knew we were a very involved student and stuff like that. So he invited us then to go to the COP25 in Madrid that happened last December. Oh my God, that feels so long ago. It's only a year, but it feels like it was 3 years ago. And so you have doors that open because we're such a small community. We help each other, and alumni are happy to get, you know, involved with current students and things like that. And right now I am back to work with that same alumni on an internship on environment, which is not my major, but she's working on dialogue on a treaty for the international ocean. And so I just happened to work with her. So opportunities are here. They're probably not here like right now in the internship office right now for environmental study, but there's definitely ways to get some. Like Elena did one this summer. I happen to do one right now. So it's definitely growing. We just need to get it now centralized.
Yeah, but I'd say again, since we're talking to people who may not end up focusing on environmental questions, I think in general there are a lot of opportunities. Paris, one advantage of being in a big urban center is that there's just a lot going on.
Especially like for Alayna, for film, for example, we have a lot of opportunity in film. I have a friend who is doing an internship right now with a film company. So it's, the advantage of being in Paris, it's very central. Like we have a lot of fashion. Like if you go into fashion, we have a lot of students working for fashion week, sorry. We have internship with the political environment, like we have UNESCO, who is based in Paris, for example. You have a lot of entities like that. So I think whatever field you choose, you'll definitely find an opportunity to have an internship in Paris.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And especially art. I feel like art.
Oh yeah. Art and history, yes.
Mm-hmm. Paris is a good place.
Most likely.
Speaking of sorts of different opportunities, Clark, would you maybe be able to talk about, I know you went on several study trips with Professor Oleg, more on the politics side, but yeah, just a little brief explanation. The study trips normally, right now in our time of COVID, it's kind of changed what these study trips look like, but normally we have these these sort of like class excursions. It can be within France, it can be within Europe, or even outside of Europe, where you basically, the idea is to basically take what you're learning in the class and be able to see it or put it into action in the actual like geographic location of where you're studying. That's kind of the idea. So Clark, would you maybe want to talk about your experiences doing that?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the study trip, it's called the cultural program, has definitely been like one of the best parts of my undergraduate experience. And I think it's something that I don't know of any other undergraduate university that offers something like this, but you sometimes they're connected to a class, and sometimes, well, they're all connected to a class. Like the professor who teaches the class will take you to the place, but sometimes they're like a part of the class, but anyone can go on any trip. So I have gone to one within France. I went to Ghana, Qatar, Thailand, and then I went to the India practicum, and that was one that was the class where you're actually doing assignments. But regularly, you basically, if you are taking a class on world politics and you're studying decolonization and like you know, the formation of new governments in the 20th century in the classroom, you can go with your professor to Ghana and go to the parliament and go to some of the historical sites and meet people and have that cultural experience as well. I'm an environmental studies person, obviously, and so something that has been really interesting for me is to see that in every like corner of the globe that I've yet to go to, like how it is being faced with a unique environmental challenge. And it works both ways, because you can take what you learn in the class to the places that you go and visit, but then from the places that you've gone and visited and the traveling experiences you've had, it actually sort of enhances your performance in the classes because you have more to draw from and you have that real experience. And this is sort of on internships again. The India practicum that I went on, as I was mentioning, you go for a month at the end of the semester and you tour a bunch of different sustainable organizations, NGOs, and then each of you partner with one for the latter half of the trip. And several people have gone back to the location in India to do another internship or a senior thesis or a research project that sort of had its inception on that practicum as well. So you can even use these experiences to get internships outside of France, anywhere in the world if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Maybe now we could talk about how to get, like, club-wise, how we can get involved, not academically, because we've been talking a lot about academics right now, but there's other ways. So you guys, even if it's not a major you are doing, like me, I'm not doing that major at all, but you if you still want to be involved in a way, because environment is such a big topic right now worldwide, you still can get involved in different ways. So Clark could tell us about, he was part of the ECS committee, for example, last year. And so do you mind like maybe explaining the different level you have like to get involved outside the classroom?
Yeah, for sure. So there's like basically the student clubs can be on any topic you want. They do happen to be a lot about the environment, but basically if you have something you want to do, if you're still like interested in film and you want to watch films in French, I think there probably is one, like a French film club. But if you have a group of like 3 or 4 students and you want to start a club, there's a really nice woman named Safia who will help set that up for you. And basically you can just do whatever you want and have a way to meet people and be social. There's a debate club, there's a TEDx conference that you can be a part of, but there's also some with specific initiatives around the environment. There's a vegan club. There's a club called AUP Green, which is currently working on a recycling project. There is the Environmental and Service Committee, which is sort of a subcommittee off of our student government, which is sort of trying to centralize student projects like around the environment. So like my composting project would be one that if someone else had a similar project, that they could go to this committee and be pointed in the right direction and see what resources are available to them. And then there's a new committee, which all three of you are on, which I'll be presenting to you tomorrow afternoon, called, I'll let one of you talk about that one.
Professor Berg, why don't you like give us a plug here about our new advisory board?
I don't know. I kind of like the idea that like the one person not on that committee introducing that committee. Yeah, so we started there's a new advisory board, basically, we'll call it, for environmental sustainability, to just try to consolidate all of the different arms of the campus that are thinking about the environment into one place. So this committee, we meet every 2 weeks and we tackle questions from a student, faculty, and staff perspective. So I love it because it inevitably you get focused on your own little world. So mostly my interactions are with other faculty, except obviously with students in my classes. And then staff tends to focus more on, if you're administrative staff, like on administration or whatever, different staff members tend to stick together. And then students have their own set of needs. And so this is a nice initiative because it brings people together from all of those areas. And we're essentially, collaborators, colleagues who are trying to solve problems and trying to figure out how to move the campus forward. And so this partly came out of a class that I teach on the environment, where students write grant proposals to suggest changes to the university. And people were writing these project proposals, and then they'd have no idea who to go to ask questions about, like lighting in the buildings or energy use or paper or whatever. And so we realized it would be a good idea to have a committee that can come together and sort of figure out which questions are central and to find answers to those questions without students feeling like they have to send emails into the abyss trying to get some administrator somewhere to answer them. So that's been, I think, the major goal is just to have an umbrella organization that can help work with all the other organizations around the environment. We also have, it's not just, there are similar initiatives around diversity and social justice. So having there's an sort of an advisory board, a council that is from different, same idea, right? That brings together students, faculty and staff who want to address questions about inequality, diversity on campus. And they also work with student organizations like Black and Abroad, who incidentally is working with our organization to look at social justice and environmental racism, right? So the idea of having all these sort of different hierarchies of groups is that we can work together in really cool, again, interdisciplinary ways to try to, do cool stuff.
No, yeah, thank you. I see we only have 4 minutes left, so I want to encourage you guys, if you have any questions, to either say them or put them in the chat. They can be about anything, as usual.
And if you're too shy to ask something now, feel free to email, admission@aup.edu with whatever question, and they can give you an answer, or they can refer you to someone else who can actually give you a more specific reply to.
Mm-hmm.
I have a small quick question.
Go for it.
You have 2 more wireless Wednesdays, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
and I'm wondering,
we have 2 more plans.
so do you guys disclose like what's going to be talked about in the next 2?
So yes, next week we know it's going to be about mental health. So we're going to be talking about like how the school like helps in that subject. So what resources are available on campus and things like that. And to be honest, the last one we don't know yet. So it's no secret. It's just we haven't finalized the detail.
But maybe if you have a suggestion, we can push that forward.
Yeah, if there's something you would like to hear about before making a decision, we are open to any suggestion like that. You'll make our work easier. We don't need to think about the topic. You'll think about it for us.
All right. Thank you guys so much for this webinar. It was very informative, and I will definitely look at environmental science now.
Well, yeah, even with film study, as you can see, you don't even need, it doesn't even need to be your major. You can still be involved. This is nor my major nor my minor, and I'm still involved. I literally was not involved in anything environmental until I went to that conference, and since that conference, I'm doomed. Now I'm in every single thing I can do.
I've never had you in a class. Well,
And
actually,
yeah.
I've had Alayna, but I've never had in a like history of medicine class, right? So that was totally a different topic. But Clark, I haven't had you in a class either.
You will in the spring.
I will. Well, and I'm mentoring you now in your independent study. But yeah, so you can get involved without having that be your major. And as I said, there are ways that, you know, if you get curious, if you're curious about the environment and you're interested in film, like we're actually working with, I've been negotiating over a long period of time with a director and film producer who does environmental documentaries, who would like to have, and she's an alum, so it's the same kind of, again, the network of people who graduated from AUP, and she wants to have a kind of think tank at AUP where potentially students can work on production of films that then have, you know, financial backing and all kinds of stuff. She's, you know, in the LA world. So who knows, you may find yourself in the environmental realm without even knowing you're interested in it.
Yeah. That's a good summary. You might, it's really so interdisciplinary that you might end up there. You know?
Without wanting to or knowing.
Yeah,
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Professor Berg or Elena. Let's go for that for the end. And thank you, Clark, very much for coming and sharing your experience. And thank you guys for showing up to our first Wireless Wednesday. And maybe we'll see you again next week or in 2 weeks. Yeah, just email admission@aup.edu if you have any further question. And we'll see you soon, hopefully.
yeah, thank you for joining.
Bye, guys.
Bye.